here we go, recording again. Okay, so we've had a little discussion in groups about question 3, and the first task then is to explain what this statement means. So how do we explain this statement to someone who doesn't know what positive correlation means? And when I wandered through your rooms, you were all on the same kind of page. You said that cities with a large homeless population tend to have an increased crime rate, or cities that have a high crime rate tend to have, are associated with a larger homeless population. So anything along those lines. Also, you could have it the other way. You could say that cities with a small homeless population have a lower crime rate. That is also a positive correlation, because the two variables are, going down at the same time. They're both working in the same kind of direction. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
That kind of idea. Great. All right, so that's what the statement means. And now someone volunteer for me the 4 possible explanations. So that's this causes this. So give me one of them.
Homelessness causes crime.
Yeah, so homelessness maybe doesn't cause crime, but it causes an increased crime rate. So a higher degree of homelessness causes a higher crime rate. That's one of the possible explanations. And now let's do the other one. So this causes this. So we've got homelessness causes an increase in crime. Yep. We lost half of the sentence, but an increased crime rate causes an increase in homelessness. So that's a second possible explanation. The third one would be that something else causes both an increase in crime and an increase in homelessness. So that's where you're saying there's one other factor that increases the crime as well as increasing the homelessness. Someone saying something?
No, just go.
Okay, that's okay, all good. All right, so that's the third possible explanation. And then the fourth one, of course, is that it's a coincidence.
Sorry, could you repeat the third one? Is it something caused both here?
So yeah, the third one, that's exactly right. It's that some other thing causes both an increase in crime and an increase in the homeless population.
All right, cool.
Right. So, another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, could that be poverty? That something else?
Yeah. So we'll get to that in a moment. So when you're writing down the 4 explanations, you're not using your critical thinking hat. You're basically just following the pattern. So following the structure of the 4 explanations. So this causes this causes this, something else causes both, or it's a coincidence is the last explanation. And then when you start discussing which explanations are likely, that's when you would say, poverty might be a common factor. So we'll get to that in a moment. But so in terms of the 4 explanations, so we've got homelessness causes an increase in crime causes an increase in homelessness, something else causes both of these 2 things, or the correlation is a coincidence. And when we say it's a coincidence, what we're really saying is that there are separate factors. So there's something that's causing that's increasing the crime in a city, and something else that's influencing the homeless situation. Okay, so that's what it means to say it's a coincidence. It means that there are separate factors involved. All right, so now we've written down the 4 possible explanations for the correlation. This is where things get interesting. We're discussing what explanations are likely. So is there a way that you can see your way to arguing that an increase in crime could cause an increase in homelessness?
Well, yeah, so crime rates such as, drugs and alcohol and all of that can cause issues with paying bills and all that kind of thing, and so that ends up being on the street and homeless.
Yeah, absolutely. So an increased crime rate can absolutely increase homelessness. So addiction, drug abuse and all that can cause an increase in homelessness because of financial difficulties. Also domestic violence. If you've got a large amount of domestic violence in a place, that can cause an increase in homelessness. So there are a number of crimes that would be directly related to homelessness. So we can definitely see our way to the plausibility of the first explanation. what about the next one? What about, is there a way to explain how homelessness might cause an increase in crime?
Once people become desperate and are homeless, then you survive by any means necessary, and that may mean committing crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So homeless people might perpetuate crime because they need to survive on the street. And also alongside that, homeless people are often victims of crime because they're easy targets. They don't necessarily want to report to the police. They may well have mental health issues of their own, and so they're easy targets. And so that's another way in which homelessness could cause an increase in crime in a city. So far there are two explanations. Both of them, the first two of the four, both seem plausible. And Liana gave us a way that the third explanation could be plausible as well. So poverty is a single factor that could influence both homelessness and the crime rate. Drugs, yeah. Both of those things could be involved there. Financial crises of any kind, really, like a recession or
pandemics.
Yes, to be relevant to the topic at hand. There's a whole bunch of individual factors that we could see that could influence both the crime rate and homelessness. So the third explanation also seems plausible.
That is coincidence.
Could it be a coincidence? Could there be entirely separate factors for crime and homelessness in a city? Yeah, they could, couldn't there? There could be that you've got a high crime rate in a city because of a terrible police force or no police force or whatever. And at the same time, you could have homelessness because there is a housing shortage in the city.
Or it could be like in California, where all the people come from all around, like they've got a massive homeless population and stuff,
Yeah.
Skid Row.
Yeah. So it's also possible that there are separate factors involved, in which case we'd say it's a coincidence, the correlation. So this is it's a messy one. It's one where any one of those explanations could be plausible. And what you need to do for part C is to discuss the ways in which each of those explanations could be, you could make a case for any one of those explanations. So explain all of that, explain the discussion we've just had, and really what it would come down to is, if you wanted to know in a particular city what is the reason for the correlation, you would have to visit that city and do some more research, and actually, and it would differ from city to city as to the exact nature of the correlation between the two variables. Does anyone have any questions about that? Does that kind of all make sense now?
Sorry. So what did you say about C?
So C, what you want to do in C is discuss each of those explanations that we've mentioned in part B, right, and explain why it is that each of them is reasonable.
Okay, cool. But on part B, we just explained the four steps only.
That's right. The four possible explanations. That's
and
right.
Then we're gonna explain on part C.
And part C is where you do your critical thinking. So where you're thinking about, well, which of those explanations is likely and why? So explain each of them.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
All right. Before we go back to question 2, how did you go with the mini maths? Did everyone do the rounding questions? All right, so I won't go through it today. There's lots of resources on Milo to help you with that, but just if you have done it, just check, did you get the same answer for C and for D?
I think so.
You should have. So there's a hint for those of you who haven't done it yet. You should get the same answer for C and for D, and the reason for that is because of the 9 in the 10 space. All right, so there's just a little hint. Oh, someone's being very noisy.
I didn't bring a notebook where I had all that stuff.
What was that, sorry?
It's me rummaging for my notebook where I had all that stuff.
Okay, never mind. All right, I'm going to take you back to... Oh, Leanna, stop rummaging.
You can leave it on mute and then just hold the space bar to talk, and then it'll just mute itself again.
Good idea.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that. The space bar to talk. Oh, cool. All right.
Or you can press Alt-A and it turns back on and off.
Okay. There you go. See, I'm learning so much. So I learned that if I have my mic up at my nose, that actually gives me a better sound. So how's my sound been today? Better?
Very good.
Awesome. It makes me look kind of weird, like I've got, you know, a mic on my nose, which I do, but that's all right. Okay, taking you back to question 2 for our last kind of 5 minutes of the Tute. So in question 2, what you're looking for is whether, firstly, for each pair of variables, think about, are they related? So is there likely to be a relationship between the average hours of sleep per night and the length of someone's left foot? If there's no relationship that you can envisage, then you would say there's no correlation there. Otherwise, you have to decide whether it's a positive correlation or a negative correlation. So we saw in question 1 an example of a negative correlation. That's where if one thing goes up, something else goes down. So if someone's spending a lot of time playing computer games, pretty good chance they're not spending so much time studying academic numeracy. So that's an example of a negative correlation. And the way you would explain, when it says to explain, so for questions 1 and 2, for question 2, parts 1 and 2, at the end of the question, it says select a positive correlation, explain why it's positive, select a negative correlation, explain why it's negative. So the explanation would be along the lines of the one that we gave in question 1. So when we said that correlation was negative, and we would explain that correlation as being negative by saying the more time that someone spends playing computer games, the less time they're likely to have available to spend studying numeracy. And that would be all. So that would be an explanation of why that correlation is negative. So when you're doing question 2, that's what you're doing. You'll go through the list and identify each pair of variables as a positive, negative, or no correlation. And then for part 1, you would choose one of the positive ones and explain why it's positive. And for part 2, choose one of the negative ones from that list and explain why it's negative. So I'll do an example. So you can choose a different correlation to do your explanation, but let's look at D together. So when D says, okay, length of hair and amount of shampoo used, those are 2 variables, right? They're 2 things that could vary, that we could measure, that would change from person to person. And so when we're asking, is it a positive correlation or a negative correlation, imagine what happens if one of the variables is quite big. So if we imagine that someone has really long hair, what can we say about the amount of shampoo they use? Would you expect them to use a lot of shampoo or a little shampoo?
A lot.
A lot. Okay, so if they have long hair, you'd expect them to use a lot of shampoo. If they have short hair or no hair, like Greg, how much shampoo would you expect them to use? Very little or none. Okay, so in that case, what we've got is if one of the variables increases, the other one increases too. If one of the variables decreases, the other one decreases too. They move in the same direction, so that's a positive correlation. And in terms, so that would be a positive correlation. And then in terms of explaining why it's positive, my explanation would be if someone has very long hair, you'd expect them to use more shampoo in order to get it clean. And that would be it. That would be my brief explanation of why it's positive. So when you're choosing your positive correlation to explain, don't choose that one. Choose a different positive correlation from the list. There are other ones there. So choose a different positive correlation to explain why it's positive. Choose a negative correlation as well from the list and explain why it's negative. So that's question 2. Any questions about what you have to do for any of the worksheet now?
So for question 2, are we going to choose one or are we going to do all of them from A to G?
So you have to, for all of them, you have to decide whether they're positive or negative or no correlation.
Yeah.
And then you just choose one to explain why it's positive and one negative correlation to explain why it's negative.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah. Cool.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions about the worksheet? No, good. So I hope you feel like that we've kind of covered most of it, and it wouldn't take you very long to sit down and type up your answers and then submit it onto Milo, keeping in mind that, did I mention this already to you guys? I've given you a few extra days to get it in case you're feeling a bit stressed about life at the moment. So otherwise get it in by Sunday, but you've got a few extra days, I think till Wednesday or something to get it in if you feel a bit pushed for time. And also please get started on assignment 2, at least download it and read it, and make sure that in the light of what we've done this week, you understand what is required for the assignment, and then come along if you have any questions on the assignment next week in your tutorial, it's a really good time to ask them. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen now. All right, so any other questions about anything? No, all good. All right, so again, feel free to email me if anything's unclear, or if you just want to have a little chat or about your assignment, your first assignment, for example. And otherwise,
what readings are required for assignment 2?
What was that? Sorry, Samantha?
What readings are required for assignment 2?
No readings, just download the assignment sheet from Milo. And if you read through it, it should be fairly clear. It's similar to the kinds of questions you'll get that you've seen in worksheets and in assignment 1. So there's a few different things for you to do. You have to draw a graph, and you have to analyze a graph and evaluate a research article. And we'll be doing a bit more of that in next week's workshop. All right, any other questions? Okay, have a good week. I'll see you next week in our workshop, and get in touch in between if you need anything. And otherwise, just get worksheet 5 done and start on assignment 2. All right, bye everyone.
Have a good week, everyone.
Bye. You too. Thanks,
Bye.
Maggie.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.
Bye,
Bye.
Thank you.
Your daughter was great. She came in once, had a wave.
Thank you.
So yeah, enjoy your day.
Have a good week. I'll see you next week.
Okay,
bye.
bye.
You too. Bye.
Hey Caleb, you still here? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, what's like the correlation between the first one and question 2? It's the only one.
The watermelon one?
Yeah.
Hold on, I have to get the question back up again. I've lost it because I closed it. But what are the variables? Okay, daily temperature and number of watermelons sold. All right, so if the daily temperature was, if it was really hot, so on a really, really, really hot summer's day, what would you expect to happen to watermelon sales?
Go up. So it would be a positive, yeah?
Yeah, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one does kind of, people kind of go, well, I don't think they're related. And then I go, okay, and when do people eat watermelon? Oh, in summer. Ah, there's a correlation.
I thought it was a positive.
Yeah, no, it's positive correlation.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right, anything else?
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, see you later.
See ya.
Bye.